Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Korra video. This is actually going to be a kind of like a two videos in one thing, in that I've got a little bit of a Korra and Avatar news update video to do, and I'm also going to give my thoughts, some speculation on what's going to happen in the next episode of Korra Book 2, that being Civil War Part 1. So I'll cover the news first, then get into some speculation. So I'm going to try not to make it too long, because just don't want to make it that long. So, news. First piece of news is just some episode titles and confirmation on numbers of episodes. We now know what the title of episode 6 is. The title of episode 6 is The Sting, so K206 is The Sting. We also get confirmation that episodes 7 and 8 are going to be Beginnings Part 1 and Beginnings Part 2. So we now know up to episode 8 and the episode title. So obviously next week Civil War is Part 1. After that Civil War is Part 2, Peacekeepers, The Sting, Beginnings Part 1, Beginnings Part 2. And we know that the episodes are going to air weekly up until at least episode 8. We don't know beyond that because the November schedule stuff hasn't come out yet, but that's a good sign. It doesn't seem like they're taking a mid-season break like after episode 7, but who knows. It's definitely a good sign though for the series going forward. Second piece of news would be some Avatar comic news, which could possibly, I suppose, get lost a bit in all this kind of Korra stuff going on. But that's been that the Search hardcover has at last been announced. So you can see the cover of that here. So that's a really nice cover. But yeah, obviously The Promise got its hardcover a while back. It's out. Really nice book. I reviewed it on my channel. And The Search is also getting that treatment. Now, The Search Part 3 is still has to come out. That's going to be out October 30th in comic book stores. This hardcover is going to be out February 5th next year. So it's nice that we got a date for that so early, which is good. And then the little description that we get of it just more or less says that it collects the Search Parts 1, 2 and 3. It's an oversized book, which means the pages are a little bit bigger, but because there's going to be still the annotations in it as well as the sketchbook, it means we're still going to get the same situation as the Promise hardcover. Let me just show you that actually. So yeah, here's the Promise hardcover. Pretty big book, as you can see. Now let me just open up some pages and show you. So this is what the pages look like of inside the hardcover. Now, the page itself, you can see, is only from here to here, but that in itself is bigger than one of the single issues of the comic. And then these borders, as you can see, let me just find the page that has them on it. Yep, here. Here's the first page of The Promise Part 3. As you can see, in the border there's some writing there. This is from Jin Wen Yang and Team Guri Hu. They give their kind of comments, thoughts on how the production on the book went. So you get that. And also, at the end of the book, spoilers for The Promise Part 3, I suppose, final page of the comic, and then you go straight into the sketch kind of book here. And you get, obviously, there's the covers, then you get some character design stuff. So that's more or less what the Search hardcover is going to kind of look like. It's going to have the same sort of features, just be for the Search. I think the cover looks brilliant. I really like the decision to put the characters on a white background and then just have the scenery of the cover be along the edges. It's a really nice look to it, especially considering a lot of the Search covers have been very dark on the front. It's nice to have some brightness to them. But yeah, that's all the news really there is. Next, I suppose I get into some Korra speculation. Obviously, Civil Wars Part 1 is going to air on Friday. So yeah, episode 3, and I think there's a good bit to speculate upon. The first thing I want to talk about is Unalaq. He obviously was the cliffhanger on what he did at the end, that being sending his troops to the south. He has a ton of ships, ton of troops that he's sending in there, and basically he hasn't really said much about it, but that opening the portal was just the first stage of his plan, and he plans to basically use his army to bring spirituality back to the south. Not really sure how that's going to work, how promoting spirituality through invasion war is really going to work for him. Seems a bit counterproductive, but it's interesting because, there's obviously the question of, like, is Unalaq evil or what? Is he going to be the villain of the book? I'm not sure. It seems like a bit early for them to introduce the main villain. I kind of have a feeling that maybe Unalaq's being controlled by the spirits or influenced by them. Maybe they're the ones who gave him his waterbending ability to control spirits. And that's why he's in this position. He's doing stuff for the spirits because he seems kind of spiritual to a kind of almost a zealot kind of level, where he's not just fine with himself being spiritual, he kind of wants everyone to be spiritual. He dislikes his brother because his brother's not spiritual. He's fine with Korra because she's the Avatar, and he's trying to help her be more spiritual. And then he seems to really dislike the South because they're very different than the North. But at the same time, was Korra opening that spirit portal and releasing the Southern Lights again a bad thing? I don't think so, personally, just because we know the Northern Lights are actually a thing. We saw them in Skeleton in the Closet during the flashback. We saw those Northern Lights. We know they exist, so it's not a lie about those. So it makes sense to me that to balance the Northern Lights, you'd have Southern Lights, and that I don't think it would be that bad of a thing for them to come back, or that they are back now. So I think it may just end up being one of these situations where it's a good thing for everyone, basically, that the Southern Lights are back. Overall, just for the world and balance and stuff like that, it's good that they're back. But it also happens to just be one stage in Unalaq's plan, that he needs this spiritual connection to the South or something like that. Why exactly he's invading next to further his goal, I'm not sure. Because I suppose one of the reasons you kind of tend to believe he's evil villain, because he can make spirits go away, you assume that because it's so convenient when he just happens to come in and save the day in some of these situations, that he was more than likely the person who made them appear, because the reason he gets to be Korra's teacher is because everything he says is kind of manipulating the situation to, like, he reveals the lie to kind of get her upset with her father and Tenzin, which means she'll gravitate towards him. And then that fight with the spirit is kind of like what ultimately makes up Korra's mind, and that they're losing the fight, and then suddenly he comes in and does this really spiritual things, like basically showing Korra, I should be the one because look what I can do, and that's what she says to him, basically. And then in the flashback, we get it from Tonraq's point of view, not Unalaq's. And the obvious thing would be that look that you have on Unalaq as Tonraq's kind of chasing the barbarians away, it's just like, it's about a 5-second focus as they kind of sort of zoom in on his face, and he just looks really jealous of Tonraq and the position he's in. And because you see very little of him in the flashbacks, it really kind of leads you to believe that, okay, he just happened to show up and be the only one there to save the North. He was basically the North's savior. He had to have been the one to whisper kind of in his father's ear, he brought them here, like, balance of the spirit, you have to banish this guy. And obviously then he became the chief, and like it were all worked out well for Unalaq. But if we ever get the story from his side of things, are we going to see him maybe bringing the spirits there? Tonraq, whatever he didn't actually kind of promote anger from the spirits. Who knows? But the other thing I want to talk about is that waterbending ability that he has. Obviously what he does is kind of create kind of spiral patterns with waterbending around the spirit, and then somehow he makes the water kind of turn into light, which turns the spirit into light, and seemingly balances out the dark and causes it to be peaceful again and kind of go back to the spirit world, I assume. But, the obvious question is it a solely waterbending ability, or is it just say, the spiritual side of waterbending, because we know that fundamentally bending is a spiritual thing too. That energy bending is like the first form of bending, and that's like really spiritual. So if you assume that the four bending disciplines kind of stemmed from energy bending, that each one would, in theory, kind of have a skill that links both the element and a form of energy bending. So water bending is obviously this skill, and if you watched it while it aired live, as it kind of went to commercials, they did a little thing like they showed a little clip from like Core was on an air scooter, and then the second one they showed was her doing an airbending technique on some spirit bat that also turned into light. So it seems like at the very least there's a waterbending skill to do this technique, and there's also an airbending skill to do it. So it wouldn't be too far to kind of extend out that there's an earthbending one and also a firebending one. Unless they're going to say that the more spiritual elements are water and air, and then the other two aren't very spiritual. But it would make sense in terms of balance that all elements would have some form of this. So I'm not really sure exactly what they're doing. For me, this is what's making sense in my mind, connecting a lot of things together. That this skill is like the spiritual side of each element. Like the waterbender, that would be the only one you could do. The other theory I have would be that maybe the waterbending is just for show. It's just to distract people and make them think that it's a special waterbending technique, and that in fact what he's doing is actually some form of spirit bending or something like that, that the spirits actually thought him, if he is indeed in like league with the spirits under their control, they taught him this or something like that. That's the other thing, maybe that the whole swirly stuff is just for show, and that he's kind of just getting rid of the spirits with spirit bending. The first one to me makes more sense, there's more evidence for it, but it's definitely an interesting technique because Korra actually does attempt to use the technique in the first episode. Now, it's a bit confusing because you could explain it in a way as that she's just using waterbending and she makes the spirit turn white, but whether that's because she's trying to freeze it or it's actually the technique kind of working is up in the air. I'd assume that because bending didn't seem to work on them that much, and that when Tonraq froze one of the spirits it didn't turn white, that this is actually the technique sort of working for Korra, and that it is kind of a more spiritual side of waterbending, and that you're not actually attacking the person, something, but when you make a ring around a spirit with waterbending, something happens, and she just wasn't spiritually strong enough to make it fully happen, because it was an interesting one. I think it's definitely one of those things where like they put it in there for a reason, and that they really did show the spirit turning white for a reason, and that's like just one level away from it turning into light. So yeah, there's that. The other real speculation thing would be Jinora and that statue. Now, there's a couple of things that link together here. One, when Korra touches the ice above the kind of Southern Lights thing, when she unlocked it, when she touched it, there was actually a little kind of a release of orange energy, and then the statue obviously glows orange. So there's a link there in that usually when we've seen the statues in the Hall of Avatars light up, it's been in response to an avatar entering the avatar state near it, and they would glow the typical whitish blue colour of the avatar state. But in this case it was in response to the portal opening, and it was just this one statue that glowed orange. So that's interesting. Not to mention that this statue is unique compared to the rest, in that it's not just a statue of a person, it's a person with kind of spiraling energy around them. It's a person with like something on the back that has symbols written on it. The hands, the arms appear to be missing, and it kind of looks like it's made out of wood, but I'm not sure. That maybe just the design of it. That's just missing the hands, but yeah, I think it's just so old that it's maybe missing the hands, and the face seems a bit worn out, so you can't really make out for sure, like if it's, as everyone says, Wan. I would assume it would have to be, because we know eventually Jinora goes to the spirit world, so there's obviously the thing of how does she link up with Korra, how does like Korra agree to her going along. I'm really beginning to believe now that Jinora is going to be the one who hears the story of the first avatar from Wan, and she goes on some journey to find information to give to Korra while she does something else. That's just the way it seems to be working out, in that Jinora was the one who was called apparently by this statue. Like, she definitely seemed drawn to this by some force, a la Aang and the Lion Turtle. He was kind of drawn to it. So there's that. Now, this kind of, I think, furthers the connection between Wan and Wan Shi Tong, because we know that Jinora visits Wan Shi Tong, and then the statue more than likely is Wan. So there's that. But it's definitely one of the most mysterious things about that episode, in that there's really only like a minute or two of screen time for her, and it was kind of the kind of B plot of the episode, but it was definitely the most mysterious. I think that's more or less all the speculation I have. As for what I think is going to happen next episode, that was a lot of series going on speculation. I assume Tonraq, since he's way ahead of them, gets back before they do, and has already like prepared a force to kind of counteract the North, and so the war is kind of just about starting off, or at least Tonraq's like appealing this or something like that, trying to stop this kind of invasion of his tribe. So there's that. But other than that, like, I'm not really sure what's going to happen. Unlock definitely is going to have to explain his motivations for kind of bringing the whole Northern Water Tribe army down, but not really sure what's going to happen. The description like reads basically that Korra has to remain neutral as a war happens between the North and South. So Korra's going to be put into an interesting decision. How's she going to feel about Unlock doing this after her trusting him? Does she think of it as a betrayal? Is she going to be looking for an explanation for why he's doing this? Or that's interesting as well, how that uncle niece relationship goes. Is Korra going to make up with her father? There's a lot of stuff, but it's interesting that there's even this much discussion to be had. So I'm just going to end it there, and thanks for watching, and bye.